Welcome to everyone. I'm really excited about the session today. We've got three excellent presenters that are going to have a conversation, a presentation, and a bit of sharing of information about this really important topic of what we can do to try and help protect our clients from tech-enabled abuse. Before I go any further, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Gunaratne people in Victoria and acknowledging the people from the lands throughout Australia. I really would appreciate if you'd like to use the chat to introduce yourselves. We'll also be using that if you have any questions as we're going through. It might be helpful if you put a little question mark in front of questions, and that'll help us to sort them out from chit chat. And feel free, if you do have some resources as we're going through, feel free to share those with the other attendees as well. We will be emailing out the recording and resources to everyone who's registered, so don't stress if you're a note taker. You will be able to review later. Okay, I'd like to introduce the speakers and hand over to you to introduce yourselves. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Joanne Law. I'm the Director of Mediation Institute. So we train and support family dispute resolution practitioners and other mediators as well. So it's a very relevant topic for all of our members. I might go in a bit of a reverse order and introduce Fiona Kirkman next. Fiona has been instrumental in making this happen. So thank you very much, Fiona. Would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you to the Mediation Institute for hosting this webinar. Many of you may know that I'm somebody who wears a few different hats. I'm quite passionate about family dispute resolution and resolution without court in particular through the use of mediation, and have my own firm, Kirkman Family Law. But also I'm very interested in tech, and I actually work with Yehan at Corto now, part-time as well. So I thought I'd been having more and more matters where there has been tech-enabled abuse in the mediations that I'm coming across, particularly the legal aid ones as well as the private ones. There was a recent stat today, 1 in 5 women are being stalked in Australia, predominantly by somebody they know and usually by a former partner, and often technology is being used for that stalking. I found myself wanting to know more and spoke to Pip about that and Yehan, and we decided to join forces and have a panel discussion about this important topic because it's becoming more and more prevalent in family law matters. That's a bit about me, Kirkman Family Law. And as I said, focus on mediation, but we have actually just recently extended our services into consent orders and divorce, particularly for those that reach their own agreement or through mediation, party-only mediation in particular. So I've just launched a new website if you want to have a look at the links when we send them out. But over to you, Pip. I'll let you introduce yourself and then Yehan, and then we can go through and get started on the case discussion and case studies.
Fantastic, and thanks, Fiona, and welcome everybody. My name is Pip, and I'm a real advocate for Fiona Kirkman Family Law. They've done some wonderful work, and I do refer a lot of my clients to her as well because I'm a private investigator for domestic and family violence and also the lead educator at Upstream. And we do advocacy as well. So I spent nearly 20 years in the New South Wales Police Force, investigating primarily child protection, sexual assault and domestic violence, but also alcohol-related crime. And just for a bit of fun, I went to the Olympics for counter-terrorism and athlete protection. So that was my highlight. Since then, I've done some journalism, especially into the Family Violence Royal Commission down in Victoria, and most recently working with the eSafety Commissioner, delivering their education package to frontline services in tech-facilitated abuse and as well as online abuse with the new introduction of the Online Safety Act, which is currently under review as well. I work a little bit in financial and economic abuse as well, providing workshops for facilitation around research. And I'm here today to share as much as I possibly can. And if I could give you my USB out of my brain, I would, but we'll try and fit as much information as we can into the next little while. Over to you, Yehan.
Hello everyone, welcome. So I'm Yehan Gunaratne. I work as an information security architect at Codo. So Codo is a software development company in the legal AI space within Leaf family. So my primary objectives are to protect Codo organization and its stakeholders from the cyber threats, and also we deal with a lot of sensitive data from our clients. Data security is also a major objective under my belt. I'm very much interested to be a panelist on this conversation today, which is under tech-enabled abuse and safeguarding your law practices. I'm looking forward to have a good time with you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Pip and Yehan and Joanne. So we might bring up our first poll, which is, if you can put that up, Joanne, have you ever had a client who has alleged tech-enabled abuse? So just to get us started on that poll, a yes or a no, just to understand where your knowledge is on this topic, and there'll be a follow-up question on your understanding of this topic. So I'll just give you a couple of moments to answer that. In the meantime, just want to cover off the agenda. So what we're going to look at is Pip, with all her expertise in this area, is going to give us an overview of what is tech abuse and what are some of the protective measures. So basically a 101 in a bite-sized chunk introduction with some great slides she's got, which we'll share after this event. Then we've got some case studies, actually one case study that builds upon itself in 3 parts, and we'll discuss that as a panel. And I'd love you to add to the chat your experience, particularly we're going to break it down into issues in the home and stalking through smart devices in the home, stalking and tech abuse, utilising the children and their phones and gaming, etc. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll look at images and AI deepfakes and how images can be shared by text and social media. So to have a discussion about that and what you can do in that respect. Yehan's then going to touch on an introduction on cybersecurity in the law and how law firms, mediation practices and other businesses can best protect themselves, and some stats around that and some just general basics that you can implement into your businesses. And then a case study on that as well. And then we're hoping to leave you with a few checklists, that practical implementation strategies and some resources that you can take away to educate yourself and then be able to educate your clients. As we said, we've got some polls and some questions, so we'll continue to go through those. So I think we've got the poll answers there.
Yep.
If you can share the poll answers, what was the stat there? We've got about 89%, and we've got quite a big group here that has answered that question, 62%. So as you can see, this is my experience, the experience from the Australian Bureau of Statistics about stalking and tech abuse and how prevalent it is becoming. The second poll there, if you want to launch that, Joanne.
Okay, yep.
As well, is as we start to talk about these things, I want to ask this poll at the beginning, but also the end, how confident you are in identifying and addressing tech-enabled abuse in family law. I want you to think about how can you recognise when there is tech-facilitated abuse in a domestic violence situation? How can you respond to that, and how can you provide support and refer survivors to appropriate services? Do you struggle, so you haven't received much training, you're not very tech-minded, which I'm sure some of us are? 2, are you aware and can recognise it but find it challenging, and you want to increase your understanding, or you're all over it? You know what tech abuse is. You ask the right questions of your clients. You know how perpetrators can use technology to stalk, harass, intimidate, threaten and humiliate victims. So we'll stop the poll in 5 seconds. If you just want to finish filling in that poll. And I think the vast majority have said they're aware of it, which is good to see, because the previous stats showed that there's significant number of you have had cases involving tech-enabled abuse, but you're not all over it yet. So it's probably why you're here, to gain a greater understanding and education for yourself and your clients. So we'll just share those results. Thanks, Joanne.
Yep, should be sharing.
Thank you. So we've said 79% there.
Yes.
All right, so maybe hand over to you now. I don't think we've got any initial questions. Feel free to add them and we'll try and answer the questions as we go, but we'll also allow some time at the end for Q&A. So maybe over to you, Pip. Feel free if you want to take over the slides, or I can continue to run the slides and just let me know.
Yeah, I might get you to do that under the circumstances. That'd be good.
Thank you.
What I love to start off with tech abuse and really get a great understanding for is if you're using technology yourself, as to how you use it and how you use it to communicate, because quite often we just make a lot of assumptions about the way people communicate is normal or to those, and we really need to understand how they use it. So a lot of the generations now, especially those younger ones, use text messages, they use emojis, or they'll use different language, and quite often it has a personal meaning. And I guess it also is that in the relationship as well. When we're looking at domestic violence, quite often the messages that will be sent need context, and I think that's something really important that we address up front, because it will help you identify as well as categorize and then strategize for the solutions that they're actually looking for. I can tell you that most of the victims and survivors that I deal with just want it to stop. They don't necessarily want a legal process, or some do want an outcome which might hold them accountable, but quite often they're just looking for a strategy that's going to stop that from happening, and for people to believe them and see what it actually means to them. I wanted to talk quickly about the difference between platforms and programs and devices, and how important all of that security is. And I know that Yehan's going to go into a lot more of the online stuff. So I'm going to stick to this, I guess, the tech-enabled through platforms and using devices. So here we've got three really classic examples. And my question to you, if you want to drop it into the chat, is to, when you're looking at these sort of situations, and there will be context around them, but what would have the most impact on a victim survivor of domestic violence? And I'm going to give you about 9 seconds to answer that, because quite often it's the first thought that comes into your mind. The first one is a broken phone that's been shattered. The second one is a car alarm that has a GPS tracker, as well as an automatic kill switch that you can operate wirelessly and remotely. And the third one are some really toxic and death threats, maybe some doxing around where that person might live as well. I'm not sure if I can see any of the results, Fiona, but feel free to let me know what that is. Yep, you can put in 1, 2, 3 as an image, or you can just label it broken phone, car alarm, or death threats. What I've put down below are some of the recommendations or the strategies that we use and that we recommend. And it's really important that we empower survivors of tech abuse to actually know their devices, be able to get safe devices as well. So maybe replacing the device, also setting up new accounts. And as I see the responses coming through, I can see that the impact might be emotional, it might be their physical safety, or it might be their ability to actually access support through the phone. Now, sometimes we have remote and rural areas that aren't covered with the online sort of services, or the reliability of those services isn't as great, so that they are used to it and they have other strategies in how to communicate. But quite often, most of us would be very lost without our phone or a connection to a device. And if I was to ask you, just when you wake up in the morning, what is the sort of, if you run through your schedule through the day, how many touch points are there that you're actually dealing with when you're talking about tech? So is it, do you reach for your phone the first thing in the morning? Is it the alarm that goes off? Do you turn on the news? Are you using a phone to ring in, or the internet at your house, or the Wi-Fi services to activate your alarms? And when we're looking at these sort of devices that make our lives a lot easier, I really don't like to demonize that, but I want you to understand the components that go towards creating tech like harm and impact. So we've got a few responses there, which is really good. And just, yeah, as soon as you wake up, it's in your hand. Not always the best habit, Beth, but it's a good one to work on. And interestingly, there's a lot of twos. And this, I think, has been my response from the frontline services that I work for, is that it's that what this particular one where there's a car alarm, it actually sets up a level of digital paranoia where somebody feels like they're being watched and monitored. They might feel like they might be questioned about where they go or how long they've been. So they will actually start to change their behaviour so that they can survive, is what we call it. So it goes against what they would naturally and normally do if there wasn't a threat or there wasn't some sort of harm that they might be going through. So thank you for those responses who did, because it does give me lots of insight into what people are up to. When we're looking at the TFA roadmap, so TFA is often referred to as tech facilitated abuse, or it can also be tech enabled abuse. And that's where it's being weaponized and not used for the purpose that it was intended. We're looking at those device security. So there's a real screening process around getting the information that you need in order to either gather the evidence that you need to prove that there is some sort of domestic violence or that they have experienced it. And quite often it's around that device safety. So just some simple tips around changing passwords, getting a new phone can really be the strategy that they need. Then we look at the online safety and the digital identity that you might have, or the privacy and protection of those devices and all of your online accounts. Just for a bit of trivia, everyone has at least 120 apps sitting on their phone, which means that's 120 passwords. And if you're using a password manager, it might make it a little bit easier. But quite often, if your partner, your intimate partner, knows your email, they can also set up accounts in your name as well. So being able to protect that digital identity and your digital footprint is really important. And then recognising when it becomes abuse. So if we were to move up into social media, that's probably one of the platforms and the programs where we see a lot of it, mainly because it's in the public domain. It might be in a community group. We've just seen a lot of the groups which have been harbouring survivors of domestic violence or abuse from dating apps being shut down because of the defamation laws. And so that used to be a platform where people could actually check for their own safety, and now those are being forced and withdrawn. So I'm happy to touch on a little bit of those apps or the social media platforms, but ultimately they're used for communication, for connection, and build communities, as well as publicising businesses. So you can imagine for a woman who is running her business online, any sort of bad connections, or reputation harm can actually cause that financial and economic abuse impact as well. So we're looking at how that all connects, and it also might isolate them from the community in which they are surrounded by. And then we move into that tech coercion and abuse. So I don't want to demonise tech. I love it. I've got lots of it and I use it every day to communicate, to set up calendars and invites, and coming to you today from down near at the people. So it's really great that we can use it. It's just understanding how we use it and what we're using it for, and how perpetrators of domestic and family violence actually use it as well. So we might move on to just this quick 101 on devices that are often used for the safety and security of our home, except when the home is no longer a safe place to be. So you can see that there are a range of devices, including micro cameras right through to a vase, which actually has a camera inside it, the AirTag. You've got your doorbell that can monitor when somebody comes and goes. And you've also got that baby monitor, which has been identified as probably one of the more dangerous ones, because it also has night vision and motion sensors. And you can also talk to it through the platform. So a perpetrator can be halfway around the world and actually be hearing and seeing what's going on. Now, what I have got here is the wrap up. This is what it looks like. So this is the type of tech facilitated abuse and the forms. We've actually got around 75 that we've identified and we've got strategies for. But you can see there, a lot of it is used to monitor, to surveil, to track, to stalk, to harass, intimidate, to threaten, humiliate. And the list just goes on and on. But I guess when we're looking to try and intercept or intervene or even stop it from happening, we have to have a number of strategies, because one strategy might actually cause the perpetrator to do something else. So if there's any questions around that, I just wanted to touch on digital coercion, because I think that this is a space that will definitely become more popular over the next 12 months as we look at coercive control. And digital coercion is really those micro behaviours from a perpetrator of domestic violence that starts to change the behaviour of a victim survivor. In order for them to survive, they actually have to change the way that they live and do things to keep them safe. So where anything from questioning about finances or monitoring or tracking, threatening, and even restricting access to things like bank accounts can actually cause a real level of harm in those relationships, and including those harassing messages as well. So I wanted to give a couple of tips, but Fiona, did you want to do any of the case studies first, or are you just happy for me to move through these little tips so that people have got some strategies before we move in and thinking about other things that they can do? Yep. Okay. So these ones are some of the strategies and solutions that we put through. Okay, we're going to go to case studies. Here we go.
Okay, so we'll go to the case studies, and I want you to think about if this is your client. Okay, so a background, this is a 3-part case study. Background, Jordan recently returned to work after being the primary carer for their 2 children. During their relationship, Alex used their technology skills or tech skills to control smart devices in the family home. So we've looked at some of those smart devices already that Pip's discussed. Jordan's words: I used to admire Alex's tech skills, but over time they used it to undermine me, pointing out my mistakes. I eventually let Alex take over everything tech related. Now the house feels like a prison. One time Alex locked the garage remotely, leaving me unable to leave the house in the car. I felt completely powerless. Pip, you've mentioned some of those smart devices. Yehan, did you want to expand on that and just talk about, from a technologist's perspective, what are some of these things in the home that might be used against parties potentially that we should be aware of or ask questions of our client about?
Yeah, I did mention that one about the car alarm, and I think that's probably the most serious that we've ever seen, and especially through COVID. We had a case where the partner actually literally took the 10-kilometre rule verbatim and put a 10-kilometre radius on the car as part of that alarm, and it meant that his partner actually was stopped in the middle of traffic. Lucky there wasn't too many cars around, but the car just stopped without notice because it had reached the limits set by the program that was on his phone. So we can see how that can cause a lot of psychological distress and emotional harm. And then if we move through to what's inside the house, even things like the remote garage, not locking that and not giving her access to a garage remote means that she can't leave the home if the car's parked inside the garage as well, so especially if there's no access inside the garage. Even things like smart TVs and having access to security cameras inside the house. If they're also using those on their phone, they're able to then monitor what's going on. And quite often, if there's no sound, things can be addressed in an argument, or it could start a fight, or it can also be used to gather evidence against the victim survivor, recording them when they're disciplining their children and putting it out of context. There's a lot of ways that it can be weaponized.
And Yehan, maybe if you could expand on how do these technologies work, and what can we do in this situation from Jordan feeling that the house feels like a prison? What can she actively do to stop this from happening?
I think in the present, as Pip explained, like any device can be a smart device, right? From your smartwatch to your phone to your refrigerator or your air conditioner or the gate or your GPS devices in your cars. So everything can be a smart device, right? So I think in this context, what I understand is it's quite important to have equal access rights. Like I understand one person doesn't have much access and one person has like almost every access levels to control these devices. So I think if we can share equal access rights among these smart devices platforms, that would be a good thing. And also, in this case, I would understand Alex is a tech person, but Jordan is not. I think not just cybersecurity, just technical things for everyone, not just for the folks and cybersecurity folks. I think it's best that Jordan grab some more information about on the smart devices or about what are the consequences of not having specific access levels to this device. I think Jordan needs to learn about this stuff and also have more awareness on the technological stuff.
Knowledge is power, as we'll see when we look at some of these strategies as well. I'll move on. Anything else you wanted to add there, Pip? Because what I'm seeing, particularly in the house, quite regularly in my matters is, and I've got one myself, the door cam of watching people go in and out of the house, but that being used when, particularly if they're living separately under the same roof, which is becoming increasingly common in this cost of living crisis, that people can't afford to live in two households, but that the monitoring that can go on, not just of the parties themselves, but of the children and who else is coming in and out of the house and what time are they leaving. And so that door cam, I think, is one big thing, but then all the other cameras that are around the house, and also in a post-separation context, using that and having access to even the lights going on and off, the smart, the Google Home, everything is for our advantage, but can be used to monitor and track what people are doing within the home. So maybe, Pip, if you can talk about the impact on Jordan. And we've purposely, as you can see, Jordan and Alex, neutral names. Is this, what comes to mind? Maybe add into the chat your comments. Did you stereotypically put Jordan as the female and Alex as the male, and is it a gender-based issue, tech-enabled abuse? So I've asked two questions there, which I never should do as a facilitator. So I might start with the first one, which was, what is the impact on Jordan? And then we can talk about the gender issue.
Yeah, so the impact initially is going to be one of confusion around understanding what the purpose of cameras being installed, or that it's very exciting to be able to get that. But I think that I'll just touch on the fact that it's gender neutral is a really good identifier that we're actually looking at the behaviours. We're not only looking at the behaviours of, say, for a perpetrator, but we're looking at the response of a victim survivor, but also how it can be interpreted as a retaliatory response. So my first advice would be to change the Wi-Fi password in this home, especially if it's post-separation. That's one of the things that most people don't do when they originally get their Wi-Fi. So I'd ask the audience, have you changed your Wi-Fi password since you actually received the modem box? Because quite often, whoever comes into your home, if you've got the Wi-Fi and they've been able to access it, they actually then have access to all the devices in your property. There's a way that you can check who's been logging on to your Wi-Fi services by doing an activity tracker just through your ISP address. But that's something that it gets a little bit technical. I'm sure that Yehan will go over it, but just knowing what devices you're connected to. Quite often, if you've got a garage inside your house or inside the bounds, your car might be connected by Bluetooth to your phone, and somebody can be listening into that conversation that you might not want them to. So it's really important that we do that audit, the security and safety audit on your phones, to find out what devices you're connected to and also who is connected to your Wi-Fi channels as well.
I think I've got something to add there. Maybe we can think of, as people explain, if someone comes to your house and then if a person needs to access the internet, okay, you just give the Wi-Fi password and you never change your password for ages. I think in this case, it's good that we can recycle our password quite regularly. Also, in the same time, if we can have a guest network set up at your house, like for temporary access, for if you're having a gathering or a party or something like that, you can provide the guest network, and at the end of the day, you just recycle the passwords. So I think in that case, having a guest network is a good thing.
And Pip, did you want to touch briefly on the gender issue? Is this, like other forms of family violence, is this a gender issue?
Yes, it is a gendered issue, and women are disproportionately reporting tech facilitated abuse. And I say reporting because that's probably the focus that we've had. It doesn't accurately say who's experiencing it. And when we have done surveys, especially through the eSafety Commissioner, both men and women experience tech facilitated abuse and online abuse, but it's very different. So it looks different and it feels different for men and women because of the social norms. And then we've got our diverse communities. So whether they're called, who may not have access, so digital, it's called the digital division. And then we've got our LGBTQI and disability sectors as well that also disproportionately are impacted by tech abuse, because some, especially in the disability space, some of our people with disabilities actually rely on tech for their daily activities.
All right, I'm conscious of time. We've got a few other case studies here, but if you want to add the questions into the chat, Joanne will monitor those and we'll go through those in a moment. So what happens now is the parents are now living in separate households. Mediation is approaching. So I know there's a lot of mediators on this group as well. So think about how you would be approaching the mediation in this circumstance versus if you're a lawyer and representing Jordan or Alex. Alex's behaviour has escalated. He's now involving the children. So Jordan's words, Alex gave the kids these expensive phones and I'm sure they're being used to spy on me. The kids are always taking photos and location tracking never turns off. Now Alex wants me to install a gaming app they made and I'm worried it'll let them access my network. If Alex disrupts my job again, I won't be able to support the kids. It feels like a trap. Okay, so what I'm seeing more and more is, in this day and age, children having mobile phones. And I think there's a lot of advantages, of course, in post-separation communication between parents and children, but parents becoming increasingly concerned around video calls and then the video of the home, children being tracked, where they're going, not going, etc. So I'm seeing a lot of concern around the children's mobile phones in particular. Also online gaming. I actually had a matter recently and the orders were just for online gaming, no other communication or spend time arrangements. And it was interesting, a lot of these topics came up about privacy and access, and this is something that it's a new world, that online gaming and connection and the benefits of that, but also the risks, and not just the risks of the children spending too much time, but risks from a stalking, harassment, intimidation perspective. So maybe, Yehan, did you want to comment around some of these devices that might be used or given to the children and things we should be aware of from a technology perspective?
I think I can think of a couple of things. One thing is awareness. I think it's parents' responsibility to make sure that children is quite aware on technical stuff. So nowadays, it's not just technical, it's the cybersecurity is a bigger concern. Make sure your children is quite aware of what's going on in the cyberspace. That's one thing. The other thing in relation to the gaming apps, I think in my opinion, you can have monitoring applications within your smart devices. For example, if your child is using a gaming app on your iPad, you can have a specific monitoring application within your iPad to see, okay, how much time this person has spent on this particular application and what sort of internet connections that this gaming app has made to the external IP addresses. Monitoring is a quite important thing if you're using a third party. And the other thing is, I don't know if this is out of the context, but if you're installing an application in your, let's say a gaming application in your phone, how many of us usually read the technical explanations in the App Store or in the Play Store? We never read it, right? We just install the gaming app and we just start using it. I think it's a good idea to read on the terms and conditions and also the privacy policies of these particular vendors. And also, gaming apps could be pretty much vulnerable for your internal network. I'm not in just Jordan's and Alex's context, but in general, you never know what sort of external connections coming into your network. So I think if we can use like a firewall sort of thing in your house to block the external connections or to filter your outgoing connections to the external IP addresses, that would be a good thing as well.
Thanks, Yehan. And Pip, how are these behaviours of the photos and the phone and the gaming apps, how could that impact, or how is that would that be impacting Jordan and the children?
Yeah, I think it really sets up an undermining between parents, because quite often if they've got different parenting styles, those conflicts that are in the home are being pushed by the other parent. So it's like parenting from a distance and engaging with that parent when they're actually with the other parent for their time that they spend. But it's also about allowing them to have age-appropriate applications. So gaming, they've all got a guide, and I guess for me, I send a lot of people to the eSafety guide, which actually tells you about every single app that they've reviewed and the risks and the ability to secure those online accounts. The other thing is that setting up with parental control. So I certainly echo Yehan's sentiments about that, but also a safe space, like having that relationship with your children to say that if something doesn't feel right or something's not right, for them to be able to come to you and say in a non-judgmental way, I think that this is what is going on, and just being able to recognise those behaviours around, is the child being questioned? We've had cases where the child has been encouraged to get up in the middle of the night or 2 a.m. and play a game with the parent, which is just not a responsible thing to do while they're in the care of the other child. But how do you monitor and police that and then not undermine the relationship that child has with the parent? And just knowing how to report things like that. I've always told parents to set up a separate email account for any gaming portals that they use, because you don't want to be using your personal private one. So you should have one for yourself, you should have one for your banking and all of that sort of stuff, but you should also then have other emails that you can use for online accounts, and even one where it's a co-parenting email. That's not what you might use for schools or for something that you can monitor as well.
Setting up those new emails, maybe considering, like many of us do in the family law space, a co-parenting app that's specifically relating to the communication is things to look at as well. Deborah Akers has added a comment here. I also ask about a family iCloud account and advised getting another. I had one father who controlled the account and refused to hand over the password until we got orders for him to do. Children were being tracked through the children's iPads.
Yeah, so there's a way to report that, and you can actually rescind the consent that's been given originally to Google or to Apple in relation to those iClouds and what they have access to. Quite often it's about going to the platform or the portal that you're using to actually revoke the consent that's been given.
Okay. And when we're drafting, if we're drafting orders or a parenting plan, what sort of things should we be considering?
I think we have to make technology work. I think it's about that equity, parents having an oversight and an understanding of the impact that technology is having on children. And quite often one parent will have a relationship with the child that might allow them to have a little bit of a closer disclosure. So things like especially for young girls, we see a lot of disclosures around eating disorders or social media influences and those sort of things that are disclosed either at school, but they won't be discussed with both parents. So it's about really having an approach to technology that both parents can rely on and understand, and be able to hold the child accountable, not necessarily each other. I think when you start to see the behaviours of another parent, it needs to be actioned or responded to in a way that it excludes the child from the conflict rather than taking it up with the child, because that's where they feel like they're the ones at fault, like they're the ones that are doing it because they're being enabled by the other parent.
Mm. And I think you need to take that when I'm come across these issues, looking at the benefits, but looking at the risks and thinking about maybe some quite detailed agreement clauses or orders in regards to how the communication is going to take place, when is it, what room, things like that, and just the practical side of things as well as the clauses. Sometimes more information, getting more information from your client, having a discussion. As we said, knowledge is power, and making sure there's boundaries and expectations on what should be done and what shouldn't be done in the agreements as well.
Yeah.
All right, the last part of this, and I know that somebody's already added into the chat an issue that they've seen in their work about images. So again, I'm seeing this quite regularly, that images potentially that were on a phone being sent around to family members without the consent of that person, that may have been sent privately, anything from not too bad to quite sensitive graphic images. And then we've got AI deepfakes, and obviously I work and see the great side of AI and what it can do, but also AI can be used to create these deepfakes. And I'd like to maybe hand over to you, Yehan, on what they are and what can be those negative sides of AI, particularly in that image space. But if we add to this scenario, so Alex is angry about the outcome of mediation, didn't reach an agreement, and uses an AI app to superimpose Jordan's face onto a graphic image, texting her to her family and posting it on the X, or formerly Twitter, platform. I can't believe Alex has done this. What do I do? So think about that case scenario, but maybe you can educate us around what are AI deepfakes, what the positives of AI. There's a lot which we don't have time to go into today, but I'm sure I'll be involved in some webinars in the future showing the benefits. But the negatives, talk about in a family law context particularly, and these images, what should we be aware of?
You want to go first? Or?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this up. Yeah, fake profiles, probably a big one. And when we're looking at what's been created here, so you've got that AI generated, they've actually developed apps that can actually declothe people, which is really, that's not an ethical or well-built app, but it's obviously done for the purpose and of intent to cause harm, and there's no other reason for it. So it's understanding what that intent is behind that behaviour. Again, it comes back to the behaviour and the impact and harm that it's been caused. Generally, if it's posted online, it can be removed, especially if it's a private image, and that includes private parts, private activities, things like sexual activity being recorded without your consent and published online. If it's got a URL and it's on a platform with a handle, you can report that to the e-Safety Commissioner, and they will have that down within a matter of hours, if not days. And that's the sort of content that is really serious, but it probably should also be reported to the police for investigation. Then they will, and the e-Safety Commissioner and the police, which is the state-based investigators, will work together to preserve the evidence. The way that the internet is set up is that can be preserved. The offence it's to create, publish or socialise images without consent, which is 91P of the New South Wales Crimes Act. And it's a really important part that you understand that it is a criminal behaviour, and it can actually lead to a lot of other things, including getting access to the perpetrator's computer or their phone where there may be other images. And so even having those on his phone or her phone can constitute as part of some other offences as well, including intimidation or harassment. So if it's being sent, though, through a message, and it's through like phone to phone and not over a platform like a messenger, Facebook Messenger or a Droid or WhatsApp, it's a very different offence, and it's also dealt straight by the police. So those can't be retrieved, they can't be removed. But what happens is they can seek orders to prohibit any type of publication or posting or sharing, and those offences are really dealt with quite seriously. There are different jurisdictions in terms of whether it is a message carrier, that would be like on Telstra through a phone, that's under the Telecommunications Act, which is Commonwealth. And then you've also got 91P, which is sharing of images without consent under state crime law. And then you've got the eSafety Commissioner, which is the Online Safety Act, which they have the powers to remove it and also issue fines to platforms if they don't remove it. So there's a lot of action that can be taken, but it really comes down to how do we prevent this from happening? And given that sexting is a really way that intimate partners communicate and the way that they do things, it's about understanding the risks that when somebody has those images of what's going to happen and seeking, that might be an order that they have to seek that you don't publish any of them just for the prevention. So it definitely falls under AVO protection as well for civil, and any of those sharings is definitely an offence under that protection as well.
I think Joanne's added here, she had a client where a fake Facebook profile was set up as a prostitute using her photos that she had huge difficulty getting Facebook to take down. Don't know when that was, Joanne, but are things changing? I know the laws changed recently in regards to more accountability on the part of social media platforms.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago when the eSafety Commissioner was just really getting their head around it. So
yeah, they're very serious. So the online abuse is we encourage people to report it to the platform first and give them the opportunity to take it down, because it would be in contravention to their community terms and conditions of use of the platform, because they're very ethically based. So they don't want to be breached by the eSafety Commissioner. But I guess when the image-based abuse and you've got that situation where it's online and people are able to see it, if you make a report online immediately, they will have that down within hours. And I think that is the great thing about that civil response, is that they have direct communications with all of these platforms and they're able to negotiate that removal really quickly.
And there's a few slides here which we'll send out to you around, it sounds like eSafety.gov.au has a lot of information, and they may be, if you're a bit confused where to go, they might be a really good starting point on contacting them and then taking it to the next level, like the police if necessary.
Yeah, and they do take third-party reports too, Fiona. So that, I think that's really important to know, that to empower that victim, you might actually have to help them, and that QR code will take them directly to that reporting page that you see there.
And Yehan, did you want to add to that AI? There's the good, but there's also these AI deepfakes and things like that. Can you talk us through what AI can do in this space, particularly around images?
Yeah, sure. I think about 15, 20 years ago from now, we were a bit concerned about Photoshop, right? Image photoshopping, and people usually put their faces on something else, like something like a graphic photo or a photo with a violence, and they copy the other person's face and publish it. And still, if you Photoshop something, normal person can recognize whether the photo is being Photoshopped or not. But with AI deepfakes, it's not the case. So deepfake means actually deep machine learning fakes. So deep machine learning fakes means they will run like complex algorithms, AI algorithms, to match your face to the picture that you're copying the face into. It's really difficult nowadays to track these deepfakes because, see, one thing is there's tools like easily available online to edit your pictures and insert someone else's face into a picture, right? It's very easily accessible, and I don't know, there's a lot of AI platforms for this. So what they do is like they carefully match the pixels of the initial face into the other picture, and it's carefully merged with the other picture. And it's not the case. There's videos as well. So nowadays you can probably copy someone else's face into a video, and you can play that video, and it would be very realistic if this is a fake video. So it's really hard to catch those deep fakes. I know there are very expensive tools in the market in the forensics industry to catch these deep fakes videos and photos. I think the implications are probably it gives a lot of misleading information and false information, and it can be used for social engineering. and there can be political motivations for a deepfake. So there's a lot of implications, but my point is AI has been there for last 20, 30 years, but AI was never a topic commonly in the society, but now it's very easily accessible to everyone, to good people, to bad people. Anyone can do anything. So it's a big problem. I think maybe the governments or the legislative authorities should make more laws on the AI side.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, there's comments here around the importance of this being taken seriously. And I think that is education of the profession itself, the lawyers, the mediators, the courts, and then being able to educate our clients on ideally prevention. And then there is just one other thing to be aware of in this space. I'll just slide. There is, which we'll send around, this risks and reportables. So on this topic, Pip, did you want to just mention this? We'll send this around, and it's something that you can use and with your clients potentially as to what type of risks in this tech-enabled abuse area, of cyber abuse, cyber bullying. For example, have someone set up a fake account in your name with your image and a different name, like what Joanne mentioned? What do you do in that scenario? Do you want to just touch on that, and then we'll move on to the cybersecurity?
Yeah, so this was just a really important tool that we developed. It's got links to all of the definitions of the types of behaviour, but it's a great place to start. It actually has 44 questions, so that can be really overwhelming for people to go through. But what it's ideally, it's about prioritising what is important and what can wait, and also coming up with strategies when things do happen. So the idea is that you get the person to themselves to actually judge where the risk is and if it's having an impact or if there's harm that's being caused, and whether or not it might be a reportable matter. Even though it might not hit the criminal threshold, especially with coercive control, the collection of those behaviours, and if it is impacting on a victim where they're not doing what they would naturally and normally do in the course of their day or their day-to-day activities, it might actually be a reportable matter. So you can actually then start to list it, and they can build that timeline out that they need. There are a lot of alternative reporting platforms. You've got scams and frauds that can be done to cyberreport.gov.au as well. And it's about alternative reporting, not necessarily always reporting to the police, because they're not always going to have the solution or the outcome for you. And like I said, most people just want it to stop. So if you can come up with a solution where they're able to empower themselves to report it or protect themselves by installing software. Social Protect is probably one of the biggest ones on social media at the moment, and that actually quarantines any type of abusive messages on your platforms, but also in your messages as well. Now, the technology is there and it's coming out in new phones, so it's not something new. But it's just being aware that that sort of avenues are available, that not necessarily everything is going to be reportable to the police. So this is happy to provide this PDF to all of them so that they can work through it.
Thank you. That's appreciated. And I think what you've said around this tech-enabled abuse is not necessarily the only form of family violence that the victim survivors and their families will be exposed to. And often it's part of this pattern of coercive controlling behaviours, and the documenting of those behaviours and using a tool like that screening to look at the patterns of the collection of those different forms of family violence can be really powerful when we're looking to perhaps report to the police incidents of coercive controlling behaviour under the new laws that commenced in July. I think obviously we're focusing today on tech-enabled abuse, but this is often not in isolation. And I know I've done some work with the Safe and Together Institute, who's training the courts and the lawyers and the independent children's lawyers, and hopefully the mediators soon as well, around the different types of behaviours, coercive controlling, the patterns of perpetrators' behaviours, and the impact of harm, and as you say, how it changes the survivor's life and their family's life. And so it's looking at patterns and harm as well. So I think we need to take that into context. Conscious of time, we do want to cover briefly, Yehan has a few, just three short slides here on cybersecurity, because we also want to protect ourselves as firms and make sure we're doing what we can. And I've got a case scenario around this, but yeah, maybe talk through the stats we should be aware of, which some of them are here, and what we can do to protect ourselves as firms in our communications.
Sure. I think cyber crimes, not just in Australia, globally it's a problem, right? So it grows every year. And as you can see on the slide, in Australia, it's about 94,000 incidents reported yearly. And also it gets increased. So in my opinion, I think with the rise of the AI concepts and AI platforms, like, for example, like ChatGPT, not everyone should be a techie person to write a small script, like hack some software, right? So you can ask ChatGPT to write some code in particularly to run in another platform or a software to do something. So with this, I think with the rise of AI, I think it's also concerning the cyber crime is increasing. And in particularly the law firms is a major target because as you lawyers and law firms, you guys deal with your clients. So these clients can be like wealthy people or celebrities or famous sports persons. And on top of that, you guys handle like a lot of sensitive data. Why law firms are targeted? Someone can compromise a law firm database or your sensitive database and then grab those information and sell in the dark web on the next day. I've seen a couple of incidents, major breaches over the years, right? I think this is a big problem, and also law firms need to go through on certain awareness programs to improve your security landscape within your organization. The other thing I would like to point out is cyber attack vectors, in particularly for law firms. Predominant attack type is phishing emails. This is a very common thing in nowadays, not just for law people. It's just for everyone. And I, as a cybersecurity professional, sometimes I can be fooled into a phishing email and click a link inside the phishing email. And also there's phishing is voice over phishing. So someone can give a call and impersonate like your boss and tell, okay, can you share this password with me? It's very urgent and all that. So these are very common attack vectors, and also identity-based attacks and malware. And also there's a thing called ransomware. I'm pretty sure everyone of you guys know what ransomware is. So I think maybe I can explain that in the next slide. So the other thing is law firms, not just law firms, like any organization, sometimes they don't have a cyber preparedness, right? So if an incident happen, they don't know what are the next steps are. They once the incident happened, that's done. You can't reverse that. But then you need to focus on how to reduce your impact. That can be like a financial impact or reputation impact, because with a security incident, you lose your reputation and you lose your trust with your clients. So I think these are few things that you as law professionals can think of. Fiona, can you go to the other slide?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on this slide, I'm gonna talk you through on couple of topics where you can improve your security landscape within your organization. So one thing is MFA. So MFA means multi-factor authentication. Password itself is not secure all the time, right? So we just use a password and then we log into a system. So if this password compromised, someone else can be allowed into your systems or into your databases, right? Point here is like having an MFA will have an additional factor is required to get into the system. For example, like a SMS or like a call or some code from an authenticator app. And we as tech professionals, we use hardware tokens like RSA and YubiKey token, which has a biometric fingerprint enabled. Multi-factor authentication is an important thing, and you should make sure that you should enable multi-factor authentication in all your systems. And also you have to encourage all your colleagues, your staff to use multi-factor authentication so they are protected as well. Just on another note, passwords So we use, like, for example, if Fiona uses like a password like Fiona123, that doesn't make sense. We need to have complex password. We need to enable password complexities. And with the technology advancement, it's very easy to brute force your password when you have limited characters. So the new trend for password is to use passphrases with character complexities, like use like cybersecurity in law with some characters or with some special characters with numbers. Bigger the password gets, and longer the time it can get brute forced. So that's one thing. The other thing is phishing awareness training. And this is how most of the organization, not just law organization, most of the organization gets compromised into let other people into their systems. This can get in different ways. In a phishing email, you can have like random links or like hyperlinks hidden inside the text. So you need to be very careful on these things, right? So you need to have a think before you click culture within your organization. So I think it's a good thing. So simple example, if you're using Outlook, if you hover over your mouse pointer over or a hyperlink, it will give like a link to the target. So you can analyze quickly whether this URL is a dodgy one or a good one, or if you have a doubt, just get someone else's opinion on that. So phishing emails usually implies a lot of urgency, especially during impersonating phishing emails. I can get a email saying, okay, let's say Fiona is my boss and there's an email coming to me, okay, Yehan, I need you to approve this bank transaction as soon as possible because we're losing a contract, and this person can put some account numbers within the email. So I think this email is from Fiona and I just approve it. So you need to have additional verifications when you deal with phishing emails. So the best way to avoid this thing is your cybersecurity awareness within your organization. Bring a cybersecurity professional, or there's a lot of online platforms that you can refer to in terms of phishing awareness training. The other thing is also a very important one, update software and system patching. So patching in IT languages is upgrading your systems. For example, updating your iPad to the latest version, right? Regularly, you need to update your smart devices, your computers, your servers, or your network devices, because the vendors usually push security updates into their devices in a monthly manner. For Microsoft, we have a thing called Patch Tuesday. So every first Tuesday of the month, they release a lot of security and feature updates. Doing this, because if you don't do this, there'll be a lot of vulnerabilities that can be exploited from external networks if someone is able to get into your network. So it's quite important to patch your systems quite regularly. Backups and recovery solutions is also important. Let me take a quick scenario. Let's say if you are impacted with a ransomware. So ransomware can come through a phishing email, or it can come through like a attachment in an email. So basically, mostly ransomwares are macro-enabled Word or Excel documents. So you just have to make sure verify your attachment in your emails before you open them. So simple click would execute a program in the background, and you wouldn't know what's going on in your computer. So what ransomware does is ransomware usually encrypts your data within your computer or within your server or within your network. So it can spread through the network as well. And then ideally to decrypt the data, you would need to provide a key. So to get this key, you need to pay the bad guys like Bitcoins or something like that, or it's usually a larger money to grab this key. And there's no guarantee, even if you pay the money or in Bitcoins or in whatever the means, you would not get the decryption key. Always best to prepare yourself before a breach. So best to have a backup solution. If you are attacked with a ransomware, just have a like monthly or a fortnightly or a weekly backup solution, and then If you think you can't recover anything, you just restore your backup. So that in that way, you can have your sensitive data back in your networks or in your databases. The other thing is having an incident response plan, right? So most of the organization, if there's an incident happen, let's say there's a big data breach, or if there's a hack happen within your network, you would know what are the next steps are, right? So I think once you go through an incident, it's quite important to so the incident happened, that's it. You can't reverse it. The next steps would be to minimize the impact, right? With this impact, it can be like a reputational damage towards your firm, or it's financial damage. You'll get a lot of lawsuits and fines and whatnot. So it's best to have an incident response plan. Like simple example would be like if someone attacks your network, first disconnect your system from the external networks, right? Basically cut off your internet gateways and whatnot. So the external parties cannot access your network through your routers or modems or whatever. So it's best to have an incident response plan. And once you get back on your feet with your systems and whatnot, it's best to have like a lessons learned conversation with your colleagues or with your superiors.
Thanks, Yehan. And just to bring this together briefly in the last few moments, a few minutes of this webinar, we've got a case study that brings together what the law firm can do and what the client can do. Susan's story, she suspects her ex-husband, Michael, has been accessing her confidential legal communications. Michael managed their shared cloud systems and financial apps during their marriage. Susan noticed that Michael seems to know details of her legal strategies and financial documents that she had only discussed with her lawyer. The law firm is now concerned that Michael may be accessing their communications through shared cloud systems. Susan's words, Michael knows things I've only talked to my lawyer about. I don't know how he's getting this information, but it feels like everything is being watched. If he's already seeing my emails, what else does he have access to? Is my data even safe? So I think maybe in a few tips for the law firm, Yehan, and then maybe a few tips on what Susan can do.
I think in this scenario, I think the best approach would be setting up a couple of monitoring systems within your house. I understand not everyone's tech savvy, but you can get someone's professional opinion if you're going through some sort of a scenario like this, right? So there's a lot of ways that can be a home network can be compromised, as I explained earlier on the PIPS session. If someone comes to your house and asks for your Wi-Fi password, and if you don't recycle your Wi-Fi password, and this person will have access to your Wi-Fi network a couple of blocks, a couple of houses away from your house, right? So you need to run a couple of best practices, have guest network set up within your network, and also recycle your password in the guest network or in your main network. The other thing is setting up monitoring systems. As I said, for example, if you have smart cameras, just take a couple of minutes within a week and see who has access what. And if you see some suspicious login towards your smart camera platform, you can figure out that, okay, something's happening. So you need to change your passwords and things, access controls immediately. And also as I said earlier, making sure you don't click anything phishing. Like in this case, Michael can send like a phishing email to Susan with a dodgy link, and if the link's being clicked, it can set up like a bot network within the network or within her, let's say, laptops and whatnot, and every activity she does, Michael can see it from the other side of the world. So these are the few things that I can think on this particular scenario.
Thank you. So I'd love any final questions in the chat, but we wanted to just wrap up from what Pippa said and what Yehan said, how we can protect our firm and also best practice in protecting your clients. So I think, as I said at the beginning, educating ourselves, educating our clients, but asking the right questions. So to identify those risks. So we'll send around from those tech-enabled risks and what you can do, the harm and how you can report that. But some basic questions like who has access to your email, phone, other communication devices. I always have in my intake, do you want that hidden, that email? As a mediator, or are you okay with the other party having access to that email? But thinking about if there has been a history and there's concerns in this area, maybe thinking about changing your email, changing your phone, changing your other communication devices, who controls the tech in the household, and changing those passwords, just doing that tech audit and then looking at changing those passwords, resetting passwords, passcodes, just checking the settings, then staying informed, safety informed communication. So setting boundaries in your phone with your apps, the children's devices, using secure court approved apps for co-parenting perhaps. And as Yehan said, two-factor authentication is key, but also having recovery, how that's going to work as well. Practical steps, so encourage clients to reset and wipe shared devices, assist in decoupling shared tech, and like we would bank accounts. So you've got joint bank accounts, we now want sole bank accounts. You had joint technology, now we want single technology access. Think about from a parenting agreement, so parenting plans, parenting orders, what strategies or boundaries can be included to manage tech misuse and ensure safe communication between the parents, as an example, but also between the parent and children. If there is, from a law firm perspective, address data leaks and implement network protections for individuals and for firms, and collaborate with tech and safety experts. There's people out there that you can contact. She had a couple of slides on this, so just looking at making sure we change those platforms, looking at the settings, so going to the settings on your phone, privacy and security, and then looking at changing those passwords, doing an audit, checking the biometrics. Then there's some resources here, and we'll share this with you, a password tip, a password checklist. As she said, 120 apps you have. How are you managing those passwords? What if something happens? Recovery of those passwords. So we'll send that around. We've talked about the referrals and the reports through the eSafety Commission. Last sort of resources, maybe you could talk through these. Yehan, there's a few from your perspective.
Yes, so I've provided some important links to see what sort of security improvements that can do in your firm. And also there's a thing called Essential 8, which is proposed by Australian government. So you can take a look at that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And as we said, the first step, eSafety Commissioner, and then Safe Steps has some good information there as well. A bit of a poll as we finish up on the webinar today. I hope that you've been able to gain some education for yourself, then for some education for your clients around what is tech-enabled abuse and how you can best address it. So I see that there's not as many people on the struggle side, and you're more aware and can recognise it. And then getting more education yourself, looking at some of these resources. Is there any final questions, Joanne, or did you want to do a bit of a wrap up there? We'll end the poll in a few moments and I'll show you and we'll do some final questions. Was there any sort of summary from your perspective or any final questions there?
No, look, people have been great sharing different examples of what they've experienced in practice. What occurred to me is I'd encourage everyone to do this for yourself. It doesn't matter that you trust your partner and your kids. It's a good exercise to look at, can you do these things, and work out how you would find out if you don't know how, because then you're going to be in a much better position to speak with your client without feeling like maybe I won't go into detail because I don't know what I'm talking about, which, yeah.
Yes, and I think this is obviously focus today is on a family law context, but this can apply particularly for those of us with children who use phones and online gaming. And looking at having those conversations, I think, as Meredith said, Rebecca said there, having that big chat with the kids on being aware of these things and educating ourselves, doing that tech audit. So very much appreciate you hosting this webinar, Joanne, and the Mediation Institute, and Corto and Yehan for your time today from a security expert perspective. I have got the links there to LinkedIn profiles and also the names of the different organisations to reach out to. And I think Yehan's offered, if there's any questions from a tech perspective, to reach out via email. So happy for you to put your email in there as well, Yehan. So thank you for that. But thank you for everyone who has attended today. What we'll do is we'll send out the recording, the slides and the resources. And if you have any further questions, I know Pip and her organisation Upstream Investigations is always willing to assist. She's definitely an expert in this area. And thank you very much for your time, and all the best as you navigate this tech-enabled abuse sort of territory in your family law matters, that hopefully this greater awareness for you can better assist your clients. So thank you very much, and we'll end the webinar now and look forward to seeing you online on a future webinar that I'm involved in.
Absolutely. And I'll just echo the thanks to you, Fiona, Yehan, and also to Pip for very high quality information and support for our people.